Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. The title is The Soul of the World is Being All of You. And the topic is general, but it is inspired out of a sentence I wrote. I actually wanted to name the title Soul is You, You is World, and to discuss the world soul and what does it mean that we are individuals in a space-time continuum, in the biggest void, in the grandest meaningless system. We are trying to find meaning in what we are. There's a quote by Marcus Aurelius. He says the soul is dyed with the color of its thoughts. And so we think what the soul is the complete animate source of the being. That means right now, what I consider to be this term soul is not 100%, it cannot be known. If it is known, it is not it. What that means is, in front of our eyes, known objects, behind our eyes, unknown subjects. And if we choose to only see the relationship of these two, we miss out on what else there could be. The idea that the soul is you is that the concept of the soul comes from the word breath. Its derivation comes from the word breath. And what does that mean? People back in the day would look at people who would die, and as the air, as their breath would leave, it's as if something left. Something left. The person was there in whatever circumstance of physicality, and suddenly the eyes were closed. The breath lift off. Went for lift off. In yogic thought, the idea of Mahasamadhi is that really, that the being consciously, they become their breath and then they leave as space. They leave the realm as space. I would tell you that what is us and what is simultaneously being the whole cosmic activity is very hard to separate. That means when I think about who's here speaking to you right now, I notice my name, I notice my background, I notice my history, I notice all the stories that I have journeyed through and like war paint put on my face, We journey through many personas, and the reason we can is because we're never the persona. The person uses the vehicle, but the person is not the vehicle. And so that is the question, that we are going through a vehicle of manifest meaning. I shared this concept in another talk. I said, you know how we have rent a car? Now imagine it was spelled rent a karma. And what does that mean? That means the vehicle you're in, you're bound to its karma. When the person enters a bus, they are bound to the karma of the bus. So I find that from a yogic standpoint, from a Vedic standpoint, where there was the Atman, where there was the Parabrahman, it's the implication that what you are identifying with is not the absolute, is not the complete. So we are identifying with an incomplete snapshot of a massive cosmic activity and self-declaring, self-proclaiming the solidity of what is real and what is unreal. It's as if an ant trying to fathom why the president of a country gives a speech. That ant under a rock cannot possibly comprehend. In the chat section, arrogant prophet says the persona is to keep us grounded in this world. The persona is from the world. It's like you have no choice. Your sense of personhood comes from the outer realms immediately, and then the inner realms, there's the free will to adjust it. I have looked into this concept where what is more important, to be in reality or to see how far reality can go in case the previous reality wasn't the complete one. There's this argument by Frank Jackson. It's called Mary's Room. And in this argument, the idea is that Mary is this scientist, this incredibly genius scientist who knows everything about the physical realm and about neurons and about how sensory perceptive experience occurs and whatnot. And she's in this house, where it's everything is black and white, and instead of windows, though there is screens, computer screens instead of the windows, which only show the outside world as black and white. And the idea of this argument is that Mary is in a black and white room and she is accepting the factual position of the realm. That means it's not that it's right or it's like it's like you can conduct a science experiment, let us say, and when you do this, does it matter what color you're seeing? It doesn't matter if the experiment is being done through a lens of black and white or suddenly the whole color spectrum is there. So the whole point of this was, in this Frank Jackson's argument of Mary's Room, is that Mary leaves the room. And when she leaves the room, she goes and sees a color like red for the first time. And when she sees the color red, she realizes what she thought was the absolute position of the realm, which was in black and white, is not the only thing. So this is the argument suggesting that materialism, in a sense, is false, because if the materialism we think is absolute materialism now, and we experience something that shifts that, it can't be the same. Now, the whole discrimination is, I would say, of course, Frank Jackson, at the end of his life, he countered his own argument. But I will say in my view, his argument technically can't be countered. He counters it as if there's a different qualia that comes and repositions it. What that means is a qualia is like an inner experience. There is a quote by Dylan Thomas. He is saying this to his father on his deathbed, on his father's deathbed. And he looks at his father and he says, "Don't go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light." And so when I look at human civilization, we have stopped raging against other possibilities of how the realm is. You know? What that means is, imagine you're someone who has access to a box of notebooks, empty notebooks. And this box of notebooks you are sitting on it and you don't realize you're sitting on this box of notebooks. And then somebody comes and says, "Hey man, you can choose between this tiny piece of paper or this big napkin to write on. Do you know which one do you want to write on? Do you know this tiny piece of paper, or do you want to write it on a big napkin?" And meanwhile, you are like, "No, I deserve like this, I deserve to," you fight for the bigger napkin, for example, because it's more space to write. But then you realize the whole time you had access to a box of notebooks. And that is what is going on, where the human being is becoming too convinced by the outer realms, then forgetting the inner realms, then asking itself at the end of its life, "Why was I here?" Not realizing the mind was always open. It was always accessible. That the human intelligence cannot be hidden to itself. It can be hidden to the world. I could tell you, I have a twin brother, and I could tell you, this idea, I'm telling you, nobody can see the true depths of your inner realms. I can tell you we are all looking through eyes that only we are looking through. And once we realize the power of the uniqueness of the individual, then a new collective can be ushered in. It's all the efforts of creatures that are here for a little while. And to fathom that our language is moving in the void, that we are a material, we are an immaterial. I mean, when you think about it, like it is in some sense organized madness. That we are trying to find meaning in a changing world. Guys, I need a quick intermission. I'll be back. Okay. All right, guys. I'm back. Um, Guys, I've decided pretty much anybody who has a question in the chat section, just ask it on the spot and I'll try to answer it on the spot. Because I realize if I move past the question, the inspiration of the questioner might change. But So AP says, do you believe there are different entities that can influence or even outright manipulate human consciousness on Earth? Yeah, did you know you are manipulating yourself as an entity? Let me tell you, in the inner realms, no. In the inner realms, unless you realize it's the birthright, ever presence is the birthright of your attention in a hilarious way. Like as in if here's the thing, in the outer realms, if you are an object, you can be manipulated by objects. If you are a subject, you can be manipulated by subjects. But if you realize energy and attention cannot die, they can just change, then if you stop fearing change, there is no such thing as manipulation. You watch the world. There's a story. I will share a story here. Guys, the Buddha was sitting one day, and before the Buddha's time, you can say before the Buddha opened his eyes in the world, before him there was Brahmanism. And Brahmanism, inspired out of Indian, you can say Hindu thought, what it is that the Brahmins were ritualistic. That means Buddha came and saw a lot of people doing weird rituals to kind of find the path to truth. And that is how he found the middle way. So what is happening is that this is a story where a Brahmin, one of those ritualistic people, comes up to Buddha, and Buddha is sitting silent and still. Buddha is sitting in meditation. This guy comes and starts non-stop like a machine gun insulting Buddha's soul. And so Buddha is sitting there, this guy, one after another, as if it's like a barbecue and he's raising the flames, and he just abuses Buddha vocally. you know? And the Buddha is there, silent, just watching, as if this person is trying to disturb another person. The Brahmin is trying to disturb Buddha, and Buddha's just watching him. In that whole moment, just watching him, And what happens is the Brahmin goes intense and he goes pretty much crazy in front of Buddha. And Buddha doesn't respond, and the Brahmin is shocked. The Brahmin says, how are you not responding? I have thrown so many verbal rocks at you. How have you, in some sense, how are you not influenced by this? And the Buddha says, you have thrown these abuses and insults at me, but I have not accepted a single one of them. And the man is shocked. And the Buddha says, the man is confused. Sorry, not shocked. The man is confused. And the Buddha says to the man, imagine somebody had gold. Imagine I had gold coins, and I gave it to you, and you didn't take it. Imagine I had a gold coin and I gave it to you and you didn't take it, he tells the guy. Who would have the gold coins? Where would the gold coins be? And then the guy thinks about it and says the gold coins are going to be in the hand of the person who wanted to give something but the other person didn't take. And that's exactly the moral of the story. That many things in this world can happen. You are choosing what you accept. That's the whole position of the faculty of intelligence that we have. That means when I wonder about the mind, it's kind of poetically the guardian angel of the body. It's like the mind is the soul of the body and the soul is the mind of the mind, The point is, in this life, there's a lot of movement. A percentage of this movement is unknown. A percentage of this movement is known. The percentage of the movement that is known, it is known to us because we have had exposure to familiar patterns. Now, patterns can be familiarized indirectly and conceptually. For example, people hearing me speak, or whoever's ever heard someone speak, you're becoming familiar with the unknown, with an unknown experience vocally, linguistically, on a linguistic level. But once the person experiences, the experience is so deeper. You know what it is? It's like Belief is like looking at a cake. Direct experience, indirect belief is looking at a cake. Direct experience is biting it, like actually eating the cake, experiencing it, right? And that's the difference. I would say that many people, they see life, but they see they're alive. They see other people are living, but they are not living. And let me tell you, when the mind can't make a decision, if the person doesn't practice learning not to seek 100% perfection, let me tell you, this was the kind of mystery for me. I would see a lot of sophisticated human beings in history, just reading about them. They were called polymaths. Just around the world, it's been filled with people like this. And I wondered, what are these people doing? How is one person, why is it that when we go back in history, the person was an astronomer, mathematician, da 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 da. The person was a lot of things. And I wondered, how is it? Does that mean it's like different senses of self that have attained mastery in different moments? Or does it mean it's one self as the person potentially found a mastery with the inner realm, that it doesn't matter what outer realm it is, it can function? So I was pretty much wondering, is it one thing they're doing in different moments, or is it different things they're doing in one moment? You know? You see, um, in the inner realms, you're not an object. You are a beam of attention. Guys, I want to read some things for you um, from Carl Jung. Carl Jung says, when the mystics descend into the depths of their own being, they find in their heart the image of the sun. They find their own life force, which they call the sun for a legitimate physical reason, because our source of energy and life actually is the sun. Our physiological life, regarded as an energy process, is entirely solar. Yeah. There is a quote, I don't from Carl Jung, where he talks about God. It's like as if some person in an interview asks Carl Jung, "Do you believe in God?" And Carl Jung kind of like he does this subtle inner laugh, I would say, inner laugh, where he's like, "I don't believe, I know," like he says he knows, and then when confronted about what is this, he says something that hopefully I get this accurate. Let me see. I can't find the quote, but he says something as if God is. Guys, hold on. Let me find this. It's worth it. Oh, here, check this out. Oh, no, no, wait. This isn't it. Oh, here, check this out. Check this out. Oh my God. It's not a. Oh, God is an infinite sphere, the center of which is everywhere, and the circumference which is nowhere. You know, that's the thing. That's the idea. God is the center of the sphere is everywhere. So think about um, the center of the circle is the source. In um, religious ideology, in the Abrahamic traditions, God is the source. So Carl Jung is saying if the life is like a sphere, the center of it is the idea of God, where everything is in some sense. Um, uh, the center has access to all degrees that move towards this outside of the sphere. The outside of the sphere is nothing. Do you know that means same way in our psychology where we're saying the source of our meaning is from me, that me is like the center of the sphere, the center of the circle, you know? And then the edge of the world is like the circumference, you know? And the lifetime is the radius, yeah. The soul of the world is being all of you. You know, it's all about how we are deciding what is moving first. Because the intelligence is most immediate, our conscious intelligence, we feel we move and then the world moves into meaning. We feel it's empty and we are naming it. It was man who named emptiness, and even if you reverse engineer before that, this is one of the most scariest things. I will tell you, on YouTube, I saw something, a debate between an atheist and theist. And guys, I got such a shock, not because of what they said, but the implication of what was being said. There was this strange position where the atheistic position with clear sense is telling the theistic position that it's man-made, you know, because man is receiving the meaning, you know, even if it wasn't, you know, the meaning of what the text means is man-made. Now, here's the chaotic thing, though. From the material perspective, the self is an illusion. If it's just if atoms are here first, if matter is in the causal position, this is all a show. And believe it or not, in ancient times, the lesser dimensions were the entertainment of the higher dimensions. I would say just like how we go to the zoo and we see a caged animal, I would say if there were higher dimensional beings, they are seeing us caged in our languages. They are seeing us caged in ideology. So if the idea of man, if the idea of man is man-made, language was never true or true face. And fact experientially may be there, but linguistically never. I would like to go into a quote tunnel segment of a part of these talks where I read a bunch of quotes about a theme or a certain person history. For today, I'm going to read about the idea of the soul and the world. So, Vivek Oberoi, if the world is the body, India is its soul. Okay. It came first. First quote was a bit political. Let me see. Just hang on, guys. Maybe I'm in the wrong page. There we go. Helen Keller, character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved. Socrates, false words are not only evil in themselves, but they infect the soul with evil. Now, here's the interesting thing. If there may be a huge potential, Socrates was thinking that all words are false when there's an experiencer here, when there's the logos, you know. Socrates was a person who considered an inner oracle. His mind, he was living, he was in a symbiosis with the world soul in his inner realms. John Muir says everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to body and soul. Okay. Frank Lloyd Wright says the mother art is architecture. Without architecture of our own, we have no soul of our own civilization. Edgar Allan Poe. I need scarcely observe that a poem deserves its title only inasmuch as it excites by elevating the soul. The value of the poem is in ratio of this elevating excitement. Diogenes. A friend is one soul abiding in two bodies. Henry David Thoreau. Money is not required to buy one necessity of the soul, to buy one necessity of the soul. Marcus Aurelius, to live happily is an inward power of the soul. George Bernard Shaw, you use a glass mirror to see your face, you use works of art to see your soul. Carl Jung, a psychoneurosis must be understood ultimately as the suffering of a soul which has not discovered its meaning. The psychoneurosis means it's like being stretched from two positions. What it means, I would say, what it means is it's like there's a fragment. It's like a cake divided into pieces. Now the cake doesn't know if it's the whole cake or if it's the pieces, or if it's a certain piece of the cake. We say our psychology is from the brain. So the brain is strangely like the organ where our identity resides in. So it's like actually in a materialistic sense, it's kind of phenomenal. We're all living inside a jar of Jello. I mean, there's probably better ways to say it, but Okay. Friedrich Nietzsche, egoism is the very essence of a noble soul. I would say I think what Friedrich Nietzsche means is that egoism is still more honorable than um, a careless nothing. Lucius Annius Seneca says health is the soul that animates all the enjoyments of life which fade and are tasteless without it. Marcus Tullius Cicero says a home without books is a body without soul. Epictetus says it takes more than just a good-looking body, you've got to have the heart and soul to go with it. Maria Montessori, to confer the gift of drawing, we must create an eye that sees, a hand that obeys, a soul that feels, and in this task the whole life must cooperate. In this sense, life itself is the only preparation for drawing. Once we have lived, the inner spark of vision does the rest. Walt Whitman, re-examine all that you have been told. Dismiss that which insults your soul. Vincent van Gogh says, I put my heart and my soul into my work and have lost my mind in the process. What I would ask Vincent van Gogh is, what did you lose it to? That should be the question. Because it's a passion. That means in this life, pretty much, people have different contentment thresholds. That means one person, you give them something a little, they're content, it's enough for them. You know, some person, they're hungry, it's not enough for them. So the person sets the context that they will live in long before, in accordance to how the concept they are now is moving. Eckhart Tolle says the soul is one of the words you can use to talk about your innermost being, the essence of who you are. Paramahansa Yogananda, the happiness of one's own heart alone cannot satisfy the soul. One must try to include, as necessary to one's own happiness, the happiness of others. Sigmund Freud, the great question that has never been answered, and which I have not yet been able to answer, despite my 30 years of research into the feminine soul, is, what does a woman want? Oh man. Freud didn't think about asking. Let me tell you, I find that the human urge is that it wants to be included in a game where not 50-50, but a certain percentage of that game the person feels free to express and feels free to receive. You know, and this is something very fascinating about, I've noticed in myself, at least, you know, a couple years ago, I noticed, like, the example I'm thinking of it is from a few years ago. You see, I noticed that when I stopped caring for something, I exile it from my kingdoms of intelligence. That means if Albert Einstein was walking in the street and I suddenly saw him and I'm like, what the like I would run and try to talk to him, you know? But if I didn't care, or if I had no idea who Albert Einstein was, and anybody who doesn't know who Albert Einstein is, it's kind of like disrespectful to the human species, I would say. But Albert Einstein, if I didn't care for him, it didn't matter how how much genius was in front of me. You see, it's all about where your attention designates itself. Right now, I have designated this talk I'm giving towards a certain probabilistic end I've seen, but I'm piloting it through the unknown. Albert Einstein, it is only to the individual that a soul is given. Wow. That means the individual conditions and circumstances and developments are required before you can even consider your soul. I mean, here's the idea. If there was no human body, what soul of what? The only reason we treat ourselves as souls because the idea is we are like in a swimming pool underneath the water, and we are thinking in the water there is no outer world, there is no other dimension. But when we realize we step out of this swimming pool, we suddenly realize the nature of reality. It's like Earth wasn't false. It's that I find that it's like the physical realm is not an illusion. It is an illusion if you think it is the only room of this cosmic mansion. That is the whole thing. The idea is not to get rid of the realm's physical value. What it is to recognize now we can live as spacious, rhythmic minds. That means I don't know how many people have wondered about the nature and the texture, the experiential quality of awareness and mindhood. It's one of the great privileges of life. That means it's like there was like this next level roller coaster in Canada's Wonderland. It was like, okay, you know, the person feels it's a privilege to go and see what it's like. But now I'm telling you that to ask the question, what is going on and who am I? These are the two ultimate questions. These are Thor's hammer that accidentally has fallen into the hand of the sincere. William Shakespeare says, brevity is the soul of wit. Maya Angelou, I have found that among its other benefits, giving liberates the soul of the giver. Very true. Very, very true. This is, I would say, how you get rid of, imagine if karma was like airplane turbulence and you're the pilot. By giving more than you take, the universe establishes a relationship with you that it gives to you more than you take, more than it takes from you. And if there is preferenceless abiding to see, all right, eyes have opened in a random moment. In a moment where unless I move, where does the order come from? William Shakespeare says, things won are done. Joy's soul lies in the doing. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Jesus Christ belonged to the true race of prophets. He saw with open eye the mystery of the soul. Drawn by its severe harmony, ravished with its beauty, he lived in it and had his being there. Alone in all history, he estimated the greatness of man. Oscar Wilde, in its primary aspect, a painting has no more spiritual message than an exquisite fragment of a Venetian glass. The channels by which all noble and imaginative work in painting should touch the soul are not those of the truths of lives. Guys, this may be, I'm going to comment on this quote in the sense that for me, beauty is the unknown glitch in the system. Is a glitch. So I think what Oscar Wilde is trying to say is if a work of art makes the person looking at it glitch out of how the past has chained them, do you know? That glitch has nothing to do with the person who made the work of art. It has to do with the glitch. Do you know? Wow, wow, wow. Aristotle says the soul never thinks without a picture. Look at Aristotle. Thinking like a soul in pictures, you know. Guys, Aristotle was Aristotle says love is composed. I read that. Aristotle says, for as the eyes of bats are to the blaze of day, so is the reason in our soul to the things which are by nature most evident of all. Aristotle says we must no more ask whether the soul and body are one than ask whether the wax and the figure impressed on figure impressed on it are one. Martin Luther King Jr. Pity may represent little more. Sorry, guys, let me lost the quote. Okay, there we go. Pity may represent little more than the impersonal concern which prompts the mailing of a check, but true sympathy is the personal concern which demands the giving of one's soul. Guys, I'm telling you, if Martin Luther King wrote science fiction, it would be so ahead of his time. Aristotle says no excellent soul is exempt from a mixture of madness. Abraham Lincoln, if ever I feel the soul within me elevate and expand to those dimensions not wholly unworthy of its almighty architect, it is when I contemplate the cause of my country, deserted by all the world beside, and I standing up boldly and lone and hurling defiance at her victorious oppressors. What an incredible term. Abraham Lincoln says, almighty architect. I would say when I speak about the geometrical dimension, when I consider a life to the geometrical dimension, that means we can think of like you can see an object as having life or no life. Now imagine you can see a dimension being alive or not alive. The term almighty architect is like the life of the geometrical dimension of manifestation. Abraham Lincoln's view on God, I feel, was more closer to Spinoza's. But an incredible quote nonetheless. Deserted by all the world beside, and I standing up boldly and lone and hurling defiance at her victorious oppressors. That means nature's law is the one law that if it breaks, all the other laws never existed. Aristotle says to attain any assured knowledge about the soul is one of the most difficult things in the world. Little did Aristotle know how simply the other side of the mirror cannot lie. Aristotle says whether if soul did not exist, time would exist or not is a question that may fairly be asked. For if there cannot be someone to count, there cannot be anything that can be counted. So that evidently there cannot be number, for number is either what has been or what can be counted. This is one of those glitch in the system quotes, glitch in the linguistic system. And people wonder why people meditate in silence, Somebody once said, if you are declaring yourself as spiritual and you are unkind, that pretty much like it's you're devoid of the point of being intelligent. That means if intelligent breaks intelligence, it hasn't understood intelligence. Plato. Music is the movement of sound to reach the soul for the education of its virtue. Marcus Aurelius. Such as your habitual thoughts, such also will be the character of your mind, for the soul is dyed by the thoughts. Plato says to go to the world below, having a soul which is like a vessel full of injustice, is the last and worst of all evils. Mahatma Gandhi says, I have also seen children successfully surmounting the effects of an evil inheritance that is due to purity being an inherent attribute of the soul. Oscar Wilde says ordinary riches can be stolen. Real riches cannot. If your soul are infinitely precious things that cannot be taken. Oh, excuse me. Ordinary riches can be stolen. Real riches cannot. In your soul are infinitely precious things that cannot be taken from you. Khalil Gibran, what difference is there between us, save a restless dream that follows my soul but fears to come near you? Socrates says the end of life is to be like God, and the soul following God will be like him. Khalil Gibran says if the grandfather of Jesus had known what was hidden within him, he would have stood humble and awestruck before his soul. George Bernard Shaw, an election is a moral horror, as bad as a battle except for the blood, a mud bath for every soul concerned in it, okay? James Baldwin, the question of sexual dominance can exist only in the nightmare of that soul which has armed itself totally against the possibility of the changing motion of conquest and surrender, which is love. Okay, Neil deGrasse Tyson, cosmos is an occasion to bring everything that I have, all of my capacity to communicate. We may go to the edge of the universe, but we're going to land right on you, in your heart, in your soul, in your mind. My goal is to have people know that they are participants in this great unfolding cosmic story. There you go. Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know, keeping poetry alive in halls of astrophysicists, you know. That's the whole point, guys. You know, it's like knowledge is not a mask, it is an opportunity to wonder about the questions of a lifetime. Voltaire says friendship is the marriage of the soul, and this marriage is liable to divorce. Okay. Um, Edgar Allan Poe, Lord, help my poor soul. Holy shit. St. Augustine says the soul which is spirit cannot dwell in dust. It is carried along to dwell in the blood. Nelson Mandela, there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. Epictetus, you are a little soul carrying around a corpse. Oh my God. Heraclitus, it is hard to contend against one's heart's desire, for whatever it wishes to have, it buys at the cost of soul. Paulo Coelho, culture makes people understand each other better. And if they understand each other better in their soul, it is easier to overcome the economic and political barriers. But first, they have to understand that their neighbor is, in the end, just like them, with the same problems, the same questions. Walt Whitman says, whatever satisfies the soul is truth. Vincent van Gogh. Paintings have a life of their own that drives from the painter's soul. Aldous Huxley, my fate cannot be mastered. It can only be collaborated with and thereby to some extent directed. Nor am I the captain of my soul, I am only its noisiest passenger. Wow. Wow. We are so multidimensional, guys, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how we have been able to just think that we are a thought. It's just, I don't know how it's happened. I don't know how it could be after idol worship, where we were worshiping objects as truth. It's as if we moved on to, after object worship, idol worship, into idea worship, subject worship. And to this day, even as I'm speaking, I think maybe out of 8 billion beings, maybe a little percentage have noticed that language is just the sunglasses over the unknown. It's the sunglasses the unknown is wearing. Aldous Huxley says, uncontrolled, the hunger and thirst after God may become an obstacle, cutting off the soul from what it desires. If a man would travel far along the mystic road, he must learn to desire God intensely, but in stillness, passively, and yet with all his heart and mind and strength. Blaise Pascal. Our soul is cast into a body where it finds number, time, dimension. Thereupon it reasons and calls this nature necessity, and can believe nothing else. The guys, the idea of the soul, it will archaically revive as again the man's remembrance of the hidden movements of nature as himself. And guys, the last quote for the quote tunnel to share by Shiri Chinmoy. Even spiritually advanced people are often confused. They feel an inner ecstasy which comes from the vital world, and they think this is the real delight. But it is not so. Real delight comes from the highest world to the soul, and from the soul it saturates the whole being. Okay, guys, maybe I'll make this full screen. I want people to, the listeners, to look at this picture I've put on the wallpaper of the talk. This is Carl Jung's map. This is a map. This is one of the most complex intellectual endeavors a human being has ever done on this planet, you know? That means I wouldn't, if somebody came and said, hey, should we build a giant statue of Carl Jung in society, I would say instantly yes. So anyways, let's look at this design, you know? If you see this as concentric spheres, okay? You see, the mask is like the outer sphere. So Carl Jung speaks about the major archetype, the four major archetypes, the persona being one of them. Then we have the persona, shadow, anima, animus, and the real self. Okay, which is at the end of it, you see it. So let us treat this as an onion, just to have a simple way where we're like, okay, Carl Jung liked onions and he mapped the soul like an onion. Yeah. So the same time everybody is clapping for Carl Jung, we're also clapping for the existence of the design of an onion, how that vegetable exists, to be a metaphor. So these concentric spheres, we go and look at them. The outer sphere is the persona. So that means who people are seeing me right now, the listener, I'll take myself as an example. Uh, for the people. But so right now, who you're hearing, you know, is the persona level. Okay, people are, when I speak, it's like the tip of the iceberg. It's the persona, the mask. Now, underneath this, there is the ego, how I am choosing to myself to be an individual. It's the I thought. That's the ego. Now, the I thought, this is where it gets interesting. The persona and the I thought is very important to recognize, but when it comes, then it comes to the personal unconscious. The personal unconscious means after you are implementing an I thought as yourself, as yo, this is me in the moment, that me is actually hovering between oscillating between the known and the unknown, and the personal unconscious is what you don't know, what that I thought, it's like what the I thought, it's the emptiness where the I thought is standing, but to itself, to the I thought. So it's the personal, it's a personalized, okay, I personally don't know, you know. You can say it's how the personality is unknown, being moved unknown. It's how the I thought is being animate in an unknown way, but in a personal unknown way. Then we have the shadow. The shadow, I would say, is chaos. It's literally that moment where the I thought realizes the end. Or I would say poetically, the neverland. The land that was never here. The world that was never here. That's chaotic too, in a sense. Now, what I would add to this is there is the inner realms and the outer realms. So the persona, where Carl Jung says physical world, that's in front of the eyes, that's the outer realm. Now, the I thought is a content in the inner realm. That means if you close your eyes or not, okay, let's say you're standing in front of a mirror, okay? If you close your eyes, you stop visually seeing yourself, but the one who was looking is still there. It's just the eyelids are over the view, are over the viewer, conscious viewer. So check this out. We are going into the four major archetypes. So from the first onion, we go to the second onion. Now the I thought, the personal unconscious. You see how it says cultural unconscious, biological unconscious? These are factors. The cultural unconscious means how the person has accepted themselves to be a cultural entity, but the culture doesn't have a brain. The culture is behavior. It's like an alphabet. We use it. We bring it to life. We keep it alive in our memory. We hold on to the world that we want to still linger. The worlds that we want to linger, whether in our outer realm or inner realm. Sorry guys, I need a quick intermission, few minutes. I'll be back. Okay. Um, to continue. Okay. Um, so, guys, to continue through these spheres, pretty much we're trying to see the architecture to the psyche. Starts with the persona being the outer layer, then it's the mystery of the outer layer, which comes to the individual, the ego, the I thought, and then the I thought's unknown. And because we're a cultural, these are dimensions of the outer realms, we can say. That means we are an individual. The individual is based on biological existence, it's based on a cultural existence. The anima and the animus means that it's like pretty much in trying to actualize the self, the real self. The person has to bring a balanced witness of both forces. That means the animal and the animus means if you're I'll give you an example. If you're a woman, you need to confront the animus. The animus is the male archetypal replacement of the self, you know? And you can say the anima is the female archetypal replacement of the self. So here, let me put another picture. This is going to clear it up. There we go. Okay, so guys, you see how just really quickly. Okay, here. Let me see. What can I do here? Okay, hold on, guys. There we go. So if you see the guy, how he's looking into the mirror and he's seeing a girl, that's trying to balance the forces. Think of like the airbender, like in those shows, like the archetype of the mage, the being that wanted to control the elemental forces of nature. Let's say you wanted to be a person who you went by a pond and you could just raise your hand and the water in the pond could lift up in three-dimensional space and exactly be the same shape as your hand, you know. So what I'm saying is it's like a relationship with one's subjective dash elemental being. So an example would be a way I have confronted the way I have like, how would I say it, a certain way where I have um, okay, an example would be like I've never had a sister, so I wondered if I had had a sister, what would it be? Do you know? What would she look like? And that was a way of trying to, you can say, be looking at the anima, the animus, trying to see that it's like there's a dualism at work, you know. And so if this dualism is not on in balance, the person will identify with one side in the sense not realizing that if the other, like it's strange where we are here. I'm just saying that the person has to realize the chaos and order within their uh, identity. That's it. It's These are all experiencing even cultural unconscious, what the culture doesn't know. And when you look at what culture doesn't know, it's all the chaotic and ordered things that could potentially happen. You know? So what I'm saying is it's like a whole notion of we are like this evolutionary animal. After 4.5 billion years, we can storify ourselves, we can personify the atoms we're being, you know? And even in the 6th century, they personified the universe. Think of it this way: a young child, looks at a teddy bear, and that teddy bear is alive to the child. You know? Remember, like, whoever's listening, remember your own childhood. There was a permission for the world to be animate without reason. And what does that mean? That means the person is comfortable. The person looking in the mirror when they get to the anima and animus, it is pretty much it's the last duality of the identity. And then the identity comes to the absolute. You know what's fascinating? It's like an onion. You get to the center was never a concept, and outside the onion, there was never a concept. This is why we look in front of our eyes and we're like, what's the point of all this stuff changing, this whole world happening? What's the point of an entropic universe, you know? Pretty much the idea is the universe is going to burn itself out. You see the collective unconscious, how it's limited. What does that mean? The collective unconscious in the outer realms is actually bigger. But because in your inner realms there's a central idea of the I thought, which is containing and being the first reference where all meaning is being connected to, that's why the collective unconscious. So this is actually, let me tell you what it is. Even though in this picture I set the metaphor of an onion, but you should perceive two spheres like a Venn diagram like spheres. Okay, that's what I think is going on. That would be the view, because it's all about the collective. What others don't know and what you don't know is the same, but how you know yourself is different from how the world knows itself, which is very has so many variations. It's like when you look outside your window, what you see is endless probabilities of systems set into motion in a certain way. That means when you look at genetics, it's like a certain program. Do you know what it is? It's like it's like we are not our ancestors, but we technically are them. Do you know? It's strange for me, just the fact that Terence McKenna said it incredibly. He said there's gene swarming happening on the surface of this planet. An incredible way of saying it, actually. So, guys, the whole point is, um, it's like a cake divided into pieces. Because it's divided into pieces, it can't function as a completed being. You know this idea they say divide and conquer as a sort of tactic generals would use on the battlefield? So I would tell you it's the same, where the person has lived in a society where in order to exist in it, they require to be divided. That means we require to act like we are a subject that is hovering in our mind for a moment, and then how many subjects throughout the day come and go. It's like the person says, I'm a thought, then the person says, oh, I had a thought. Who had the thought? If you're a thought, had a thought? It's like emptiness can't be empty to itself, or it wouldn't be anything. It wouldn't be a concept. It's like the word emptiness is too empty to have a definition in the dictionary. You know, it's like opening a dictionary and being like, yo, the whoever made this dictionary had, excuse my language, had balls, like was daring. Do you know why? Because they dared define it. You see, it's our lack of contentment with the unknown that makes us think life has to speed up to some picture, exact, accurate picture of the meaning, as if the outer realms. The question should be, I would say, in the future generations, future philosophers will ask this: is the meaning of life to advance is to drive in the inner realms first, or to drive in the outer realms first? If you drive in the outer realms, your mind is in the passenger seat. If you drive in the inner realms, your intelligence moves. What does that mean? That means it's like, imagine the person is not just matter, the person is space plus matter. That means there is a matter based self, and then there is a spacious awareness where that self is moving in. Okay? So that space self, your matter self and your space self, it's as if like the question is being asked: should the space self be in the driver's seat? Should you navigate, pilot your attention as your whole moment, or should you pilot your attention as a fragmentation in the moment? There is this story. It's not a story, it's something that I think it's like, it has certain historical value, but it's about the relationship of the Sufi dervishes back in the day, during the 6th century, where there was a sort of Islamic movement where Islam was happening. Do you know, people don't know this, but just like we have Gnosticism for Christianity, which is a, you can say, more spiritual focused denomination, more otherworldly focused denomination of the Christian tradition. We can say, this is all being said from a theological perspective. Um, from the on the other side, uh, okay, imagine religions are like Batman and they have a sidekick. Okay? So let's say that sidekick for Christianity is Gnosticism, the sidekick for Islam is Sufism. Now, what was the difference was that from a historical context, in the 6th century, when there was this whole monotheistic movement, kind of truth being declared as one absolute, you know, what happened was there were the Sufi mystics, people who were not ceremonial, ritualistic, but who were experiential. They were more like closer to the yogi, you know. And we have the religious idea. And so the idea, what the story is that the prophet of Islam sees a vision that there's this group of Sufi dervishes traveling, you know? And so a week passes by or something, you know, and suddenly the dervishes come, you know? And then there's this discussion between these two factions, these two different groups, you know, back in that time. 6th century was a bit way different time. But so what it was that the Sufi mystics, they were there looking at it, and they saw that the prophet's mentality was monotheistic. What that means is it was like there's only one. Do you know? And so because of this thing, the Sufi mystics, their religion, you can say, was nature. Their religion was the direct experience of nature. And because their direct experience of nature was one, and the monotheistic religious mentality was, in some sense, there's one single God, everything is God's will. So there was this common denominator where there was these two traditions, a group of mystics infusing with the religious dimension. Do you know? And so what I'm saying is, what happened afterwards. Now, how in right now, I don't know how many people know this, but Sufism and Islam are um, there is there's a non-acceptance um, between the factions, you can say, in the sense that after the Prophet passed away, the religious tradition would build mosques, and these dervishes who were mystics, next level mystics, experiential mystics, they would go and sit in front of the mosque and be like, why do you guys need to be in a building when the whole world is created for you? That means, why are you not treating the whole world as your temple? You know, have you forgotten why nature is here? You know. So based on that disagreement, eventually a lot of the Sufis were killed, you know, in history, because they were looking at the secret. But many felt the secret cannot be known. And so I think in just pretty much this is nature, you know, human beings, they pop out of nowhere. They wear language as themselves, and they function in the world behaviorally, resulting into physical influence. It's honestly a massive system. For me, I realize the moment I allow the world to be a story, I am trapped. I'm in a simulation. But if I notice, where is the language that is being the firm definition of reality? That means if the person has a belief, this whole world is like, let's say somebody has this belief where they're like, the whole world is, the whole universe, you know, is shaped like an iced tea, cup of iced tea. And people are like, that's preposterous. What do you mean? There's no sense in that. And the person's like, I believe this. You know, I believe it. You know, nobody can change my mind. You know? Until that glass of iced tea breaks, or the person realizes that as long as they choose to see the universe as a glass of iced tea, they will never see anything else. That is the danger of what I call ideological possession. That is extremism. That means it's literally, we have to treat the realm as if it's being simulated in ways that can have meaning. If you were to see the source of this, that means if we were to ask, why is the persona here? Why is the ego here? Why is the shadow here? Oh yeah, I totally forgot to talk about the shadow. But anyways, why is the shadow here? Why is the cultural unconscious here? Why is the biological dimension to things here? Why is the dualism of the inner identity here? And then finally, that answer to all of them is one single point. Call it self, call it God, call it nature. It means all phenomenological meaning is being sourced. It has a source. All energetic, structural patterns in the linguistic simulation have a source. And if we treat thinking as just decisions, there is there is an error there, because the moment we decide, we become. That means it's fascinating. We all say we have free will, but what is the free will in a changing world? Are we telling ourselves ordered stories in a chaotic situation, or are we telling ourselves a chaotic story in an ordered situation? Based on what you see as being the causal and effectual positions, the causal position, if it is known, then the effect is unknown. That means we feel we're in a simulation. Or I would say, let me rephrase that actually. If causally the source was unknown, or let me say it like this: if effectually we were unknown, the source would be known. We have no choice. We got to put the source somewhere in a cause and effectual realm, you know. So okay, here it would be like this. I'm either an unknown self in a known world, a known self in an unknown world, a known self in a known world, or an unknown self in an unknown world. And true mysticism is to realize the unknown self in the unknown world. But right now, we are living in a civilization divided between people feeling that they are God and people feeling that they are only them. You see, everybody is throwing language, painting the realm with language. You know, when I was 15, I was given the incredible manly task of setting up a dinner table. And there was this kind of transparent, like plastic thing where you would put on the table. And I feel language is that plastic thing over the table. It's all covered, you know. Either we are, things are so complex we can't do anything about it, you know, or they're so simple that because we're trying to find it in a complex way, we can never find it. So it's interesting, if you look at the two arrows, from the personal unconscious comes your shadow, the inner animal, you could say. And then there is the anima and the animus being projected from the collective unconscious. So, how we are an identity, really, the concept of even male and female, these are cultural developments, but it's not that they're right or wrong. You know what I mean? Like, it's literally that every idea ever in conception is part of the alphabet of the different ways conception has been engaged through. Do you know, when I think about my mind, it is not an object to have a sort of name or bias. Like, the mind can't even be dualistic in a stranger sense. You know, that means the viewer. That means the what is really in present in the moment is not a concept. So it can identify with any concept. It can identify with any approach, only to realize that this is all a sort of fashion of the unknown. Because if people don't know what the world is, how can they know what the self is? So the self is ultimately due to this world being extremely vast and mysterious and unknown, you know? Our eyes are designed, it seems, to be a mystery. And that is a clue, a mystical clue. This is why I say the term collective unconscious is what I personally find to be Carl Jung's genius. Just to bring attention through a certain context to that idea. AP in the chat section says, is the cultural unconscious the programming from the childhood? The cultural unconscious is in the collective unconscious, which means it's the cultural unconscious is everything everybody doesn't know. So you can it's literally like we can say cultural unconscious, the culture is a dimension. But the unconscious is not a form which can program you or condition you or something. It's just what is unknown yet. That means I can't believe so many teachers in the educational system are trying to give knowledge, not realizing that if the child doesn't understand the significance of the unknown, they would not care for knowledge. If I had a time machine and could go back to myself in every classroom I've been in, and told myself, "Hey man, you're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. There is everything is unknown. Listen." Then knowledge would have been the spark of knowledge would have been lit early. But because I didn't care, because I was like, okay, others will do it. Let me just sit back in my hedonism, my comfortable hedonistic chair, and then the world will figure it out someday. Nature is here, namaste, and that's not enough. That means so many people behaviorally act like they love the world, but they are not being in the world. They're not caring to live in it. It's like, here's the issue with the Muslim. See, no ideological system is perfect, by the way. To expect perfection from an ideological system is like to expect a candle to be eternally give light. It's impossible. Even the ideological system would be like, buddy, don't take me that seriously. If beliefs could talk, some of them would be like, stop believing in me, what the fuck? It's language, guys. I'm just being playful with language. Really what it is there's a dimension of existence being experienced that has nothing to do with the language. Then there's a dimension of the existence being experienced, and the aftermath there being the ability for conception. And some people may be like Mr.Within. What is soul? And let me just, we're gonna Google it. I'm gonna tell you what the dictionary has to say. Let's see how the dictionary has defined the soul, the idea that was meant to be beyond form. The spiritual or immaterial part of a human being or animal regarded as immortal. A person's moral or emotional nature or sense of identity. 2. And it's a noun, guys. Who knew? The soul is a noun. Guys, look at comedians looking for jokes. The dictionary is filled with it. So anyways, the second mass noun, emotional or intellectual energy or intensity, especially as revealed in a work of art or an artistic performance. Deviations from Branches of that is Black American culture or ethnic pride, short for soul music. 3, the essence or embodiment of a specified quality. Guys, just the fact that there could be like a musician, just think about a musician playing, like there's certain musicians who go into trance states when they play. Like you can say like certain performers, even, it's no longer them. They have become like the whole moment's aggregate attention result, you know? Anyways, the third, the essence or embodiment of a specified quality, an individual person, a person regarded with affection or pity. You know, okay. So here's the thing, guys. The soul is not a noun. And I am willing to, you know, stand by this statement until the end of time, you know. The moment something becomes a noun, we can tear it up. The moment there is design, that design with another hammer of design can be broken. The whole point of the soul was that there is something here that is looking, and because it is looking, it can't be what it's looking at. It is found through what it's looking at, you know? As if we are not the words, but the words are the physical manifestation. I would say all of existence for me so far has been like every day waking up and discovering a new letter to an alphabet that is this endless experiential river. So the soul of the world, I would say a word I would use would be the prime, primordial, the prime mover and primordial organizer. The prime mover. That means it's movement before a movement is required for there to be two references for reason to occur. So what I'm trying to say, guys, is that just think about it for a moment. Think as if nobody had names, nobody had a story. What would we be? We would just be a silent nature. We would be the silent expression of this universal segment. When we realize we are natural, nature's voice finds us, whether in your inner realms or in your outer realms. To study your moment as if what surface is this orb of awareness rolling over? We need massive input of new experiences of Earth and new language. We can say poetry is no longer poetry. There is a higher level than poetry. And that higher level of poetry is the introduction of new sounds and new languages. That means for me, all instruments are genius inventions. They're genius. It's like a creature in the middle of nowhere found a way to wield sound. You know, and that's the divinity of the voice, really. And people are like, why do you talk so much? And I'm like, everything I say, it's a tiny speck in this massive system. Three generals were drinking at the middle of the mountains with their armies stationed, waiting for further instructions. These three generals are drinking, and one of the generals wants to show off to the other generals, and he says, let me show you how brave my men are. And the two generals are listening. One of the generals is just occupied with drinking more. The third general. So the second general is like, all right, let's see it, you know? And then the first general says that, soldier! And the soldier runs, and he says, soldier, you see the edge of this cliff? And the soldier's like, yes, sir. He's like, run from the edge of this cliff to the edge of the other side of the cliff. An impossible task. And the soldier looks at the general and closes his eyes, breathes, and he says, yes, sir. And he runs. And he jumps off from the cliff to the other side. And he doesn't get to the other side. It's impossible, It was a ridiculous command. And so the soldier dies. And then the general who's showing off, he's like, look, that's true bravery and loyalty. That soldier knew it was impossible, but he did it anyways. That's loyalty. Then the second general is like, that's nothing. And the second general says, let me show you, true bravery. Soldier! His soldier runs in, soldier runs in. The soldier's like, yes, sir, And he says, you see that minefield? And the soldier says, yes. He says, go and in the middle of that minefield and start dancing as if you were never a soldier and you were a dancer your whole life. And the soldier is just looking at this. He closes his eyes, breathes, and then runs into the battlefield. Excuse me, not battlefield, runs into the minefield and starts dancing. And he's closed his eyes as if he's not a soldier, and actually the dude's dancing on a minefield, like eyes closed with passion, And it's like so intense, and everybody's watching, like, what the fuck, So what happens is the guy's foot hits a mine, and there's an explosion. The guy leaves the scene of the story. Um, okay, guys. Sorry for the sudden pause. I just had a idea that if I hadn't shared, I couldn't. It would have been gone. But pretty much, anyways, the guy's foot hits the mine, and oh my god, intense, chaotic. The second general looks at the first general and says, "That is bravery," you know. And the first general's like, how's that true bravery, you know? And he says the mine, he says something, the second general, he says that that person who danced on the minefield, he set up the mines. He was the person who set up the mines. That means he knew where all the mines were. But because of his loyalty, his blind loyalty, he was in some sense bound to that behavior. And the first general's like, okay, that's crazy, you know, like it's the first general and the second general, they look at the third general who's just quietly drinking. And they look at the third general and they're like, how about you? Show us the true bravery and loyalty of your men. And the third general's just drinking and he's like, my men are brave, I don't need to show anything. And the two generals are like, are you kidding? You have to. You know, you're sitting at the same table as us, you have to, you know. And the third general's like, okay, and keep in mind, guys, he's been drinking more than the other generals, you know. And he's like, soldier! You know, and his soldier comes. And he looks at the soldier and he's like, okay, what do I tell this guy? Like, he says, soldier, you see this waterfall? I want you to dive into it and then climb back up, you know? And the soldier, for a second, looks at the general and says, I won't do anything stupid like that. That's the stupidest thing. That's impossible. Climb back up? You expect me to climb back up after falling into the waterfall? It's like and the soldier says, that's the stupidest thing. I won't do it. And the general smiles. The third general looks at the other two generals and he says, that is true bravery. He used his intelligence before blindly activating into behavior in the realm. That is why we have minds. And it's strange because in all religious texts, there is a saying that says, your mind, God has given you your mind to use it. But if you are following something, then what's the point of using your mind? If I accept the world to be a painting on a wall, I have missed out the roads that my feet deserve to walk on. Be intelligent. That's the whole point of having it. It's not that we have to measure things and then accept them with a top hat on. You know, like it's like reality is not a show. It's a living experience. We are tourists in manifestation. And so I'm just saying in this talk that there can be a view that if the language and the storification and the ideological dividing and conquering was gone, it would be the one universal intelligence being mankind for a little while. This is strange, but I will tell you, it took me a while in this lifetime until I caught on to it. That the outer realms can be nothing other than a mirror for the mind. Your body is a mirror for the unknown viewer. And the unknown viewer, if it cannot stabilize, if you cannot realize that all your dreams, all your ambitions are on a rock in the middle of nowhere and you can't keep that humble level of psychology, then there's a quote from Sadi I have to share with you. Human beings are members of a whole, WHO, members of a whole, in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. That means the moment the person demonstrates an ability to break something that took 4 billion years, 4.5 billion years to be at this level, Imagine you are imagine Albert Einstein, okay? Imagine Albert Einstein is in the patent office writing his essays on general relativity and super relativity, which has revolutionized our realm. Do you know? Now imagine like suddenly like the ninjas knew like there was a group of ninjas fighting over Albert Einstein. Like old school Japanese ninja tribes, okay? So it would be this situation where imagine one group of ninjas are defending Albert Einstein, and the other group of ninjas want to stop Albert Einstein from writing this essay of general relativity. Now imagine Albert Einstein. It's late at night. He has, let's say, he wants to be a bit old school. He's turned on a candle, sitting in the patent office with the light of a candle, writing this essay. Little does imagine in this hypothetical situation, Einstein know that in the shadows there are forces fighting to keep the moment from continuing. Imagine like a ninja assassin movie level, kind of in the shadows. There's chaos and order are fighting for who gets to declare the soul of the moment. Trust me, you think if man is suggested in ancient texts to be a reflection of the gods, so in some sense man's violence perhaps is not just a argument between man and man. It's an argument between you can say universal collectivity with universal collectivity, as if space is trying to own matter, matter is trying to own space. And if this doesn't stop, and there is, I would say, in my science fiction, I kind of brushed on this idea where it's the end of the war of worlds, the end of the war of all worlds, the world of the world of worlds. A notion that just like how there is a genetical lineage, there is an experiential. If the gene is existential lineage, there's an experiential lineage, but that experiential lineage is river-like. So our body feels like a drop. Oh no, it's going to evaporate, it's going to end, you know? Our mind feels like a river. How can it end? It's forever, it's been the prime mover. It's the only thing that's been moving consciousness, you know? Many know how phenomena moves in consciousness, but very few people know how consciousness moves. And that has to change. An advanced civilization, that should be basic. Like the child should finish elementary school and having known such a complex database of various ways that the being can implement themselves. There's so much to the world, and the biggest thing you can say, the one thing, if there was one thing that could change from the whole system, it would be people, rather than being judges of the past, being explorers of the future. That is it. That means if you're a parent, look at your child and say, hey, remember, everything that people know has an edge. And if you go beyond that edge, that is where the novelty is, where novelty lives. Where the new is no longer branded as self-denial, but as collective remembrance. You see, it's like uh, it's too strange, the circumstance our eyes have opened in. It's too strange. Just looking at all the other animals on this planet and be like, okay, there's some students slow in the classroom, so why is the human being at such an advanced position of being able to realize, being able to be conscious of space? I mean, think about it. I'm pretty sure a lot of animals have no sense of notion of space, but we're that animal in nature that was like, space, let's create that word. Do you know? So there is something. I don't know, about this realm that is too unknown to be known, and some things are so known that how can they be unknown? Like the visual. Like this table is so known, it's like I don't consider an unknown dimension to this table. I don't. But when it comes to my mind, when it comes to myself, it's like when I look at that table, I'm like, that table has no intelligence. But when I look at myself as an object in the mirror, I'm like, wait, an object has intelligence? And we see it's not just an object, it's micro, it's on a cellular level. So I'm right now either one person. My real name is Amin, the online alias is Mr. Within, but I'll tell you, like, um, I can see myself as me, just one me here, or I could see myself the simultaneous livelihood of all the cells moving in my body, inclusive of the earth. And when it comes, all these circumstances are met. It's like, okay, how do you get a human being? You get a long time of development. It's as if like evolution sculpted an opportunity, and the opportunity can now be its own sculptor. And so even though the sculptor in the sky can be owned by no mind, if we are defining our freedom, then we have prevented our freedom to redefine it if we go along with that. So we should treat every person as an updating system endlessly. That's it. It's just everybody is a river. And their minds is like a river. I'm telling you, we're honestly like antennas when it really gets down to it. That's the only way I have attempted to somehow restore a sort of metaphysical geometry to the secular notion. Because you see, the moment you brand imagination as hollow, you all technically brand how you have imagined yourself to be a self in that moment as hollow. So we can't say imagination is nothing. When the person closes their eyes, they see those visuals, but it's not. It is true. Their imagination is not tangible, but it has design. And if you realize all language is a disguise for geometrical structure of value in a dualistic grid, then is there a world soul? That means, is our soul, or is consciousness the world experiencing itself through the illusion? Like the thing is, like, experience could not be elusive, but the names can. That means it's like the child thinking, wait a minute, I could have been named anything. So how serious is my name? How serious is the language that is um, uh, promising eternity when it's as temporary as where the attention goes next? The species has to stop agonizing over beliefs and disbeliefs. The species has to just realize, all right, time in to be multidimensional. There is no good or bad. There's different ways the moment has occurred. And that's the mystery, the mind is a field. In the chat section I wrote, as a response to Flower Girl, your comment, the attributeless viewer and prime unknown field-like mover of the moment is the only common denominator. Attributeless attention is what we all have in common for all that are conscious and living. There is a quote that this Sufi mystic poet Rumi says, I can't tell you how many times in moments of intensity this quote has accompanied me. Moments where I felt inner realm justifications, intense justifications. What administered, what really helped me was this quote from Rumi. He says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there's a place. He says, I will meet you there. And when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. What that means is we must be so mature and multidimensionally mature as a species that we can fathom evolution towards the inconceivable, not 100%, but to some sort of percentage of what is it like to be a pure mind field where elemental particles are moving in your attention, or that means your mind is a field. I don't know how many people experientially know this. It's like the body is like a leaf in a river, being thrown in a river. The river is the mind of the leaf. So when the person realizes the nature of their attention, how the presence prior to any image is being, then you redeem, or I wouldn't say redeem, but you, in the Bhagavad Gita says, the selfless have no karma. Because who has karma? Nature is walking here, working here. So out of curiosity, how many people here would be interested, how many of the viewers would be interested in a Discord discussion? And if it's more than 3, actually, I think I should just end the talk. This just one thing, guys. Last thing to say. If the world, if the causal position is a collective intelligence, and we feel as an effect we are individually non-intelligent particles, pretty much either you live as a mind or you were just the earth spinning around itself. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. um, and some may say, does the world have a soul? And I think the proper answer is it better. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll see you guys on Discord for those interested. Bye.